"Sir, people like you don't get to eat here. We have a certain standard." The sentence didn't come with a whisper. It slammed into the air like a tray dropped on marble. Every fork paused. Every wine glass froze midair. Marcus stood still. The edges of his coat dusted with rain. Hands calmly folded in front of him. His face didn't flinch, but his eyes, those deep, quiet eyes, told a story no one else in that restaurant could read. It wasn't just the words. It was the way the maître d' said them. Like he was taking pleasure in every syllable. Like humiliation was part of the service. Around him, the silence thickened. A couple by the window shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A waiter at the far end lowered his tray. And a man at the bar, already pulling out his phone. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I believe I had a reservation," he said. Voice low, calm, like silk sliding across steel. The maître d' sneered. Name, Marcus Devereaux. A beat, then laughter. Short, cold. "Oh, we don't have any reservations under that name," he said with a smirk. "You probably booked the wrong place." More chuckles around the room. One woman covered her mouth as she whispered to her friend. The maître d' turned sharply. "Now if you don't mind, you are making other guests uncomfortable. Please leave before I call security." Marcus didn't move. He simply looked past the man, to the chandelier above, to the velvet curtains, to the signature wall behind the bar, where his initials were carved in gold. No one else noticed, not yet, but soon, they would, very soon. Because the man they were kicking out wasn't just any man. He was the owner. And this wasn't the first time the world tried to pretend he didn't belong. Long before Marcus Devereaux built an empire, he built muscle scrubbing dishes behind someone else's kitchen. 15 years ago, he stood in another restaurant, not as a guest, but as the boy who took out the trash no one wanted to smell. The one who got told, "Don't come through the front. That entrance is for real staff." He remembered that. He remembered everything. Back then, he was just Mark, the quiet kid with second-hand sneakers and calloused hands. His mom worked night shifts, cleaning offices. His dad left before Marcus turned 10. At school, he didn't talk much, but he listened. He watched. He noticed how power moved quietly. Who got served first? Who got asked to leave? Who got looked at like they didn't belong? He kept notes, in his head, in old notebooks he found in dumpsters. Ideas, frustrations, someday, plans. By 19, he was reading finance books during lunch breaks. By 21, he launched his first online platform. Nothing fancy, just a tool for booking local chefs. It failed. So did the next one, and the next. But each failure built something stronger. His resolve. He didn't have investors. He had grit. He didn't have a fancy degree. He had hunger. And most of all, he had memory. Memory of every door that didn't open, every suit that sneered, every job interview where he was told, "You are not quite the right fit." That's what made Marcus dangerous, because he wasn't driven by revenge. He was driven by design. Years later, when his hospitality tech finally exploded, and he bought his first restaurant, not once did he think about revenge. Not then. But now was different. Now he stood in a place with his name on the deed, being told he didn't belong. He took a deep breath, letting the sting of that voice wash over him. Because pain like that, he'd swallowed it before. But tonight, he wouldn't. Not this time. The air inside the restaurant smelled like lemon oil and wealth. Every surface gleamed. Mahogany floors, crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains catching just the right amount of candlelight. Waiters moved like dancers, silent, sharp, rehearsed. At table 9, a man with a gold watch tapped impatiently at his glass. At table 2, a woman in pearls adjusted her silk shawl, glancing toward the entrance, as if the very presence of someone uninvited might stain her meal. And in the middle of that curated perfection, stood Marcus, a tall man in a black wool coat, rain still glistening on his shoulders. No brand names, no entourage, just presence. People noticed, but not the way he deserved. A hostess behind the counter leaned in and whispered, "Security might need to check that guy." Another waiter snickered, He looks like he wandered in from the street. No one asked why a man like him walked in like he owned the place, because in their eyes, he couldn't. Not with that skin. Not with that calm confidence that didn't ask for permission. Marcus didn't look around nervously. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't check his reflection like he needed approval. He walked to the front desk and waited. And waited. The maître d' avoided his gaze. Serving another couple that had arrived long after him, Marcus cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me." The maître d' turned, not smiling. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. "I have a reservation." A pause. Then the gaze up. Down. Assessing. "Name?" the maître d' asked. Already certain this man didn't belong. Marcus Devereaux. The pause that followed was a beat too long. Then a smirk. Here is no reservation under that name." He didn't even check the system. Marcus's jaw didn't tighten, but his hands, resting calmly at his sides, curled slightly. Behind him, the noise of the restaurant went quiet. Not fully, but enough. People noticed. Not the truth, but the tension. Why was he still standing there? Why wasn't he backing down? Marcus slowly turned his head, eyes scanning the room. That table? He bought it. That chandelier? He chose it. That wine menu? He approved every vintage, but no one else knew. Not yet. To them, he was just a man in a coat, taking up space, uninvited. And the thing about spaces like these, they don't like being reminded they weren't built for everyone. That's what made the next moment inevitable. "Sir." The maître d' snapped. Voice loud enough for several tables to hear. "We don't take walk-ins during prime hours, especially not in that attire." His tone was rehearsed. Polite. On the surface. But laced with something sharp underneath. Marcus glanced down at his coat. Black. Tailored. Clean. Not a wrinkle on it. But he knew what the man really meant. It wasn't the coat. It was the skin inside it. He remained still. His voice level. "As I said, I have a reservation. I am sure you think you do." The maître d' replied. "Not checking the system. But our policy is clear. We reserve the right to deny service to anyone who disrupts our atmosphere." The room quieted further. A man near the bar raised his phone, pretending to scroll, but clearly recording. A woman in stilettos whispered, "What's he doing here?" Behind her wine glass, Marcus kept his gaze fixed. "I'd like to speak with the manager." "I am the manager." The maître d' lied. That was when it shifted. He leaned forward. Just slightly. Enough for intimidation. "Look," he said, voice dropping. "Why don't you try somewhere down the street? I hear they do take out." Marcus didn't flinch, but the maître d' wasn't done. With a dramatic sigh, he reached behind the desk, grabbed a crumpled reservation list, and waved it in the air. "See? No Marcus. Dever." "What?" Then, with deliberate flair, he crumpled the paper tighter and tossed it across the counter. It bounced once, landing at Marcus's feet. Silence. Total. The kind that thickens the air. A waiter in the corner dropped his tray. Someone gasped, but no one stepped in. No one said a word. Marcus stared at the paper on the ground, then at the man. He didn't pick it up. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Not yet. The maître d' crossed his arms. "I'll ask you one last time. Leave. Or I call security." Marcus took one step closer, unblinking. "I'll wait right here," he said softly. "Until someone does their job." "Fine." The maître d' hissed. "Your choice." He snapped his fingers toward the back. Two security guards appeared moments later. Black suits tight. Expressions blank. The maître d' gestured toward Marcus. "This gentleman is disturbing the guests. Escort him out." Marcus looked at the guards, then at the maître d'. Then, slowly, at the crowd. None of them knew. None of them had a clue. They were about to make the worst mistake of their careers. But Marcus said nothing. Not yet. He was still giving them a chance. Just one. One final moment to do the right thing. And like every other time before, they didn't. The two security guards stepped forward, tall, stoic, hired to protect the ambiance, not the people. The maître d' gave a small nod. "Please escort this gentleman out." Quietly, Marcus didn't resist. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask why. He just stood. But that somehow made it worse. The silence in the room cracked. A man near the window laughed under his breath. "Damn. Thought he owned the place the way he walked in." A woman pulled out her phone. Let's see if he makes a scene. Might go viral. The cameras were on now. Not all of them obvious. Some were angled just right behind menus. Purses, half-finished, wine glasses. Someone whispered, "Is he a scammer?" Another said, "Number just one of those types who pretend they're rich." Marcus heard every word. He'd heard them before. Different cities. Different faces. Same voices. The security guards didn't touch him. But they moved close enough to box him in. The maitre d' smirked, like justice had been served. "Sir," one guard said quietly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be." Marcus looked him in the eye, calm, unshaken. "I am not the one making it hard." More whispers. More smirks. The room wasn't just watching. They were feeding off it. Here is a cruel kind of entertainment in watching someone be put in their place. Especially when they look like him. Especially when they don't beg. A glass clinked. A child at a corner table asked her mom, "Why are they kicking that man out?" Her mom just shook her head. "Because people need to know their place." "Honey." Marcus closed his eyes. Not because of fear, but because the weight of that moment deserves stillness. He inhaled slowly, letting the insult settle. Not into his skin, but into his memory. They didn't know who he was, but they would. Not because he wanted revenge, but because some lessons needed to be learned. The hard way. He opened his eyes, looked once more at the maitre d'. "I understand," he said quietly. "You are just doing your job." The maitre d' blinked, not sure if it was sarcasm or surrender. Marcus turned, one last glance at the gold-embossed menu. At the wine rack he'd personally curated. At the centerpiece flowers his company paid for weekly. And he walked toward the door. Every step echoed louder than words. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Wait." The voice was small, not loud, not commanding, but in a room filled with silence, it struck like lightning. Marcus paused mid-step, just inches from the restaurant door. Everyone turned. The maitre d' rolled his eyes. "Not now, Jenna." Jenna, a young waitress, no older than 22, hair tied back in a simple braid, apron slightly wrinkled, eyes wide, but not with fear, with fire. I saw his name," she said, voice shaking. "On the reservation list." The maitre d' hissed, "Stay out of this." But it was there, she insisted. Table 12, Marcus Devereaux, booked for 8:00 p.m. under the owners. "That list is private," the maitre d' snapped. "And clearly he doesn't. He does belong here." She cut in. And just like that, the energy in the room shifted. Not much, but just enough. One whisper turned into two. "Wait, did she say owner?" "Marcus Devereaux. Isn't that the guy from the hospitality tech company?" The maitre d' paled. Marcus turned around slowly. Not angry, not smug, just calm. He looked at Jenna, studying her face. Nervous, honest, brave. She swallowed. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought someone should say something." Marcus nodded once. "Thank you." It was simple, but it echoed. The maitre d' tried to laugh it off. "She's new. Doesn't know how things work." But now, even the guards looked unsure. One of them checked the maitre d'. "You sure this is a mistake?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Jenna's voice had already opened a crack in the room's illusion. That crack would soon split it wide open. Because truth, when spoken, even quietly, has a way of waking people up. Marcus turned back to the door, placing a hand gently on it, then paused, letting the silence hang, letting the maitre d' squirm, letting the staff glance sideways at each other, wondering what else they didn't know. And Jenna, she stood her ground. She didn't apologize, didn't retreat, she just exhaled and waited. Marcus smiled. Just barely. This wasn't the moment to fight, not yet. But it was the moment someone else showed courage. And that mattered. The maitre d's face flushed red. Part anger, part panic. He straightened his tie like it might somehow reassert his authority. "I don't care what she thinks she saw," he barked. "This gentleman is disturbing the environment. Get him out." The security guards hesitated. For the first time that evening. They weren't sure who was giving the right order. Marcus didn't speak, didn't move, didn't need to. Truth was already cracking the surface. But the maitre d', he doubled down. Because when people in power feel it slipping, they often reach for control, the only way they know how. Louder. Harsher. Uglier. He stormed past the front desk and walked right up to Marcus. And with a flick of his wrist, he shoved the nearby chair aside. The metal legs screeched across marble, crashing into a table. The entire restaurant jumped. Wine spilled. A fork clattered to the floor. A woman gasped. And still, Marcus didn't flinch. The maitre d' leaned in, breath sharp with bitterness. "You've made your little scene," he hissed. "Now get out, or I'll personally throw you onto the sidewalk myself." That was it, the line. The moment you can't walk back from. Phones were up again. This time, recording openly. Jenna stepped forward, hand trembling. "Stop, please." But the maitre d' turned to her and snarled. "You are on thin ice already. I'll be reporting you to HR tomorrow morning." That's when it happened. A man at a back table stood up. Older, sharp suit, quiet presence. "I think," he said, voice steady, "you should be careful who you are speaking to." The maitre d' snapped. "Excuse me." The man nodded toward Marcus. "Because I believe that's Marcus Devereaux, CEO of Devereaux Holdings." A ripple swept through the room like wind through tall grass. The name, the recognition. It hit people in waves. Wait? The Marcus Devereaux? The guy who bought out Crescent Hotels. Didn't he just donate $5 million to the Urban Education Fund? The maitre d' froze, for the first time all night. He looked scared. But Marcus, still silent, still calm, he turned his head slightly, eyes locking with the maitre d'. "Would you like to finish your sentence?" he asked, voice quiet but carrying. The maitre d's lips parted, then closed again. No words came out. Because how do you threaten a man who owns the ground you stand on? The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't smirking. They were staring. At Marcus. At the maitre d'. At themselves. Because when humiliation turns, it doesn't just consume the target. It reflects back on everyone who watched it happen. Marcus stepped forward. Just one pace. Not aggressive, just certain. He adjusted his cufflinks slowly. Silver. Elegant. Custom engraved with the Devereaux crest. The maitre d' swallowed hard. "I didn't know," he muttered. "That," Marcus said, "is exactly the problem." Marcus reached into the inner pocket of his coat. No one breathed. Even the maitre d' stiffened, unsure of what was coming next. Marcus pulled out a sleek black leather wallet. Not flashy, not loud, just refined. From it, he drew a card. Simple. White. Embossed with silver lettering. He held it up between two fingers. "Marcus Devereaux," he said. "Owner. Devereaux Hospitality Group." A stunned silence spread across the room like ink in water. One of the security guards took a cautious step forward, squinting at the card. Then he blinked, swallowed, and slowly stepped back. The maitre d's face drained of color. I didn't. I wasn't told." Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. Not angry. Just finished. He turned slightly and walked back toward the host podium, calm as ever. He tapped a few buttons on the reservation screen. Instantly, the display shifted, showing a hidden admin menu only high-level executives could access. At the top corner, Marcus Devereaux Fay Owner Access enabled. The maitre d' choked on his own breath. Marcus scrolled through the dashboard effortlessly. "Let's see. Tonight's performance metrics. Staff logs. He looked up, locking eyes with the maitre d'. "Did you know," Marcus said, voice smooth, "that I designed this system myself? Every shift report, every guest comment, every missed reservation, it all gets sent to my desk. Daily." A waiter in the background gasped. A bartender dropped a glass. Now they believed it. Now they realized. He wasn't a prankster. He wasn't some random walk-in. He was the man who signed their checks. Marcus walked slowly through the restaurant, each step measured, controlled. He paused beside table 12, the exact table his assistant had reserved days ago. He pulled the reserved card from its holder. Read the name aloud. Marcus Devereaux Fay 8:0 p.m. Fay VIP guest. He set it down and looked around the room. "So," he said quietly, "what exactly was I disturbing?" No one answered. Not the maitre d', not the guests who had whispered, not the influencers who'd pulled out their phones, not the couple at table 9 who'd laughed. The only sound was the quiet shuffle of regret. Marcus turned back to the front. Behind the bar, On the wall was a golden plaque. It bore the words, "Founded by Marcus Devereaux" beneath it. Diversity, excellence, respect. He stared at it for a moment. Then at the room. "I built this place," he said. "Not for people to be impressed, but for people to be respected." He didn't yell. He didn't scold. But every word landed like a gavel. Final. Absolute. He turned to the maitre d'. "I'd like to see your direct supervisor," he said. I don't think he's on site tonight," the man stammered. Marcus smiled. "Oh, I am sure he is," he said, pulling out his phone. "Because I put him there." He tapped a contact. The phone barely rang once before a voice answered. "Yes, Mr. Devereaux? Activate full override," Marcus said. "I am taking direct control of this location. Effective immediately." "Yes, sir." "Done." The maitre d' took a step back. Marcus turned to the room once more. "I'll be dining here tonight," he said, "and there are going to be a few staffing changes." The silence after Marcus's declaration felt different now. It wasn't the silence of arrogance or judgment. It was realization. Pure, rattling realization. People whispered. But not like before. These were not sneers. These were confessions. "That's him. He owns this whole chain. No, not just this restaurant. The entire group. I heard he turned a .1000 loan into a .400 million portfolio. I follow him on LinkedIn. His story's insane." A table of young professionals stared wide-eyed, one of them already Googling Marcus Devereaux net worth. The maitre d' looked like he'd forgotten how to stand. Marcus sat down at table 12. The one he'd booked himself. He didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He simply unfolded the napkin, placed it in his lap, and looked up. "I built Devereaux Hospitality from a 2-person operation. Loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. 8 locations now. Across 6 countries." He poured himself a glass of water. "I've dined anonymously at every one of them, not to be served, but to see how others are." He looked toward the maitre d'. "And today, I saw enough." The maitre d' opened his mouth, closed it again. "Because what do you say when the man you humiliated owns not just the room, but the company?" Jenna stood nearby, frozen in place. Marcus turned to her. "What's your full name?" "Jenna Brooks," she said, still unsure if she was in trouble. "You've been working here long?" "4 months. Not anymore," he said. Her eyes widened, but before she could panic, Marcus smiled. "You are being promoted." Gasps. From the staff. From the guests. Even from Jenna. "Manager. Effective immediately. I want someone who speaks up when others stay silent." The maitre d' staggered back a step. He looked like he might throw up. Someone near the bar whispered, "Holy hell. He just flipped the whole damn script." Marcus leaned back, calm, steady, unapologetically powerful. He had nothing more to prove. But the night wasn't over yet. The maitre d' took a shaky breath. He straightened his jacket, eyes darting from table to table, searching for someone Anyon to back him up. But no one would. Not after what they'd seen. Not after the silence had filled with cruelty. I didn't know," he stammered, voice barely audible. "There was no notice, no alert. I would have treated you differently if—" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "If I looked different?" he asked quietly. The maitre d' froze, and in that moment, the entire room turned. The man at the bar who had laughed earlier now stared into his drink. The couple at table 9 had their eyes on the floor. The influencers who once recorded for fun were now recording in shame. Because the performance had ended, and the mask was gone. "You can keep the jacket," Marcus said coldly. "But your position ends tonight." The maitre d's lips parted in disbelief. "But this is my career." "No," Marcus said. "This was your choice." A slow murmur rippled through the room. Quiet approval. Unspoken justice. Then something unexpected happened. A smattering of applause. It started from the back, spread slowly, then louder. A wave of claps, not out of celebration, but recognition, that someone had stood up, that someone had stood firm. And the man who once believed he owned the room, now stood alone in it. Marcus turned away, not with anger, but with finality. There was nothing left to say, because the truth had already spoken for him. Marcus stood slowly from his seat. He looked across the room, at every face that had stared, judged, whispered, doubted. Then he turned to Jenna. "Jenna," he said, voice calm, but carrying, "please gather the staff. I'd like to speak to the team." She nodded, eyes wide, and disappeared into the kitchen. Within minutes, the entire restaurant crew, waiters, bartenders, cooks, stood in a semicircle. Some stared at the floor, others watched him like he might rewrite their future. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He simply stood still. "When I built this company," he began, "I didn't do it just to serve food. I built it to prove something." The room was silent. "I built it for every young black man who was told to use the back door, for every immigrant who was mocked for their accent, for every woman who was told her place was behind the counter, not above it." He looked to Jenna, "And for people like her, who speak up even when it's hard." He took a breath, then turned toward the maitre d', who stood stiff, pale, still. "As of this moment, your employment is terminated. Your conduct violated every standard this company stands for." No one spoke. No one defended him. Because justice didn't need volume. It needed clarity. Marcus then addressed the room. "Tonight, everyone in this dining room eats for free. No tabs. No tips. On me." Gasps, followed by thunderous applause. He smiled slightly. "Let this be remembered not for the mistake, but for how we handled it." A waiter wiped a tear from his cheek. Jenna's hands trembled. This time, from hope. Marcus turned once more toward the plaque behind the bar. Diversity, excellence, respect. Then he looked at everyone. "Let's make sure we start living those words," he said. And with that, he walked out, not in defeat, but in absolute power. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the last guest left the restaurant, a strange stillness settled over the space. The maitre d' was gone. Jenna sat quietly at the front desk, still trying to process what had happened, what she had witnessed, and more importantly, what she had become part of. In a world where so many stay silent, she hadn't. And that changed everything. Marcus didn't return. He didn't need to. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just stands tall and walks away with dignity. The next morning, headlines spread. Black CEO silently destroys restaurant racism. With one move, Marcus Devereaux's masterclass in composure goes viral. Justice served Faye with class. But for Marcus, it wasn't about going viral. It was about making sure no one else like him ever had to walk into their own building and feel small, because dignity shouldn't be reserved for the privileged. And respect isn't something you earn by skin color or suit brand. It's basic. It's human. And maybe next time, when someone walks in without a name tag, without designer clothes, without a crowd behind them, the world will pause and ask, who might they be before we decide who they're not?